Hope everyone's doing well. Here we're already, can't believe it's already December. I just want to say welcome again. If you haven't met me, I'm Zach Bourne. I'm the newest member at Apprenticeships for America. I'm their senior vice president, focused in on advocacy and government affairs. Just welcome to AFA, welcome to Apprenticeships for America, and I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you all today. Absolutely essential, and one of the drivers of apprenticeship success is mentorship. When I'm looking at the data, I always go back to data. Being coming from the Urban Institute, I tend to see what's happening in the world in terms of numbers. We're seeing a clear message. Fast Company reports that 98% of Fortune 500 companies have mentoring programs, but only 37% of professionals actually benefit from them. And this gap may be widening some of the retention problems that we're seeing in various industries. It tells us something important too, that mentoring isn't failing because people don't care. It's failing because perhaps programs aren't intentional, mentors aren't prepared, or the mentorship actually isn't structured in a way to succeed. So, and when I look at some of the other research, mentoring really collapses when it relies on goodwill instead of good design. And so when mentors aren't trained or when relationships aren't supported, mentorship can really fall apart. So mentorship works when it's deliberate. And I'm so excited to be a mentor myself today. So I'd love to kind of engage in the conversation from that perspective. I'm a new mentor to our apprentice, Freddie Rollins. And Freddie's part of the Gen Z generation, which we're having a very close look at. A recent Harris poll found that 45% of Gen Z job seekers believe that AI has made their college education irrelevant, and 51% say that their degrees feel like they are a waste of money. So these are some signals we're seeing in the labor market in these polls. And it's a profound signal that the promise of higher education is starting to unravel. I think, unfortunately, what I saw in this poll is that Gen Z hasn't given up on guidance. According to that same poll, 41% of young people feel confident in navigating the job market, and that 83% of them believe that a mentor could help them, and that a mentor in the past has opened doors to that same amount that they didn't know existed. So young people want mentorship, they're asking for it. They don't need mentors who have all the answers. Luckily, I don't have all of them, Freddie. But it's also exactly where apprenticeship excels. So, apprenticeship doesn't treat mentoring like a side activity. It structures it. It trains mentors. It embeds it in coaching and belonging and skill development and directly into that training fabric. So when it's done well, a mentor can change a young person from saying, "I'm not sure I can do this," to "I belong here." And I think that's really important. So this is where we're going to pick up the conversation with some experts. We're joined by three organizations: Kimberly Harris with the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub. We've got Bob Terry with IEC Florida East Coast, and Tyshana Delaney with Cityworks DC, who also we work with as Freddie's mentor. So Tyshana, so good to see you all. Kim, Bob, welcome. And you all have actually moved the needle on mentorship, whether that's in retention or belonging, or even looking at, an important aspect that we think about in mentorship and what works is do apprentices actually complete? So I want to thank you all for being here. I'd like for you all to introduce yourself in your own words. So let's go ahead and dive in and let's kick it off with Kim.
Thank you so much, Zach. I really appreciate you and all that you're doing to bring this conversation together. It's so timely. As Zach said, I'm Kimberly Harris. I'm the founder and principal researcher and consultant at Aduca Consulting, and we partnered with the Automated Supply Chain Hub powered by MSG to do this worthwhile, timely, incredible work. And so we just look forward to the conversation, and I'm happy to be here.
Bob?
Thank you, Zach. Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Terry. I am the Executive Director of the IEC Florida East Coast chapter. There's 53 IEC chapters around the country. We're relatively new, about 6 years old, and I'm an electrician by trade, 35 years in the trade, and I'm in a position now to run the apprenticeship school. To run membership and events and trainings for electrical contractors, and we have worked with supply chain automation, Manhattan Strategies. It's a fantastic partnership, and I'm happy to be here to contribute a little bit about the electrical side of things.
Thanks, Bob. Looks like you have beautiful weather in Florida too. And then we're gonna hand it over to Ty to wrap us up, and then we'll get into our first question.
Thank you, Zach. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tashana. I go by Ty Delaney, and I serve as the manager of apprentice and employer success with Cityworks DC, as well as a former apprentice supervisor with Cityworks DC. I partnered with Cityworks DC at the conception of the program, which was back in 2020, and have served as a youth mentor for years upon years. So over like 16 years. And so in my role with CityWorks DC, I specialize in building strong pathway experiences for our apprentices as well as our employers. And my intention and my approach is to lead with a people-centered approach, of course, ensuring our mentors have the guidance, the resources, and the confidence that they need to thrive, as well as our employers feeling a part of that process and an experience so that they can receive strong talent, of course, workforce support, and solutions that can lead to operational success as it aligns with their goals and strategies.
I love that. I love that. 16 years. That's amazing. So we got some good experience here. I think that's important when we think about mentorship. But when you think about mentorship and when you think about it being done well, what's one practice that you all are using that actually moves the needle for apprentices? And I'll start with Ty.
I would say for CityWorks DC and something that is very personal to me in all of my years of serving as a mentor, I think that there are various components such as regular communication and a structure for your mentorship program, as well as personal guidance and role modeling and career exposure, employer environment, and alignment. But out of all of them, I think that personalized guidance for mentors to adapt to each apprentice's learning style, their personality style, their interests, their career goals. That serves as a platform and a launching pad that will address like technical skills, professional behavior, career readiness, and of course that personal growth for them. And so developing strategy and structure around that will tailor the remaining components, right? Such as getting them engaged in the process and in the experience, and not having the apprentice in this position of you do as you're told, and you do as I say, versus getting them involved into vision development, vision mapping, seeing them a part of the mentorship, the apprenticeship would definitely serve as one of the effective tools that you can use to ensure that not only does the company or the individual supervisor, apprentice supervisor sees the ROI, but the apprentice or the mentee receives that as well, so that they can visualize themselves with the expected outcome as we introduce like inputs so that they can see the
Mhm.
outputs on their own.
I love that. It's a two-way street on mentorship. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, no, Ty, that's awesome. I think you took my answer. No, nonetheless, actually, with electrical apprenticeship, I think it's a little bit different, but I think you'll hear that we have some of the same pathways. I kind of go at it with two words, and that's connection and consistency. In apprenticeship, the student is working full time for a contractor. So, we as the association running the school, we only really catch them, when they're coming to school. Now, some of the contractors may have one mentor, one trainer that is working with this individual, continuously. Obviously, that's the perfect scenario because they're really going to get to know, the strengths and weaknesses of that particular apprentice. However, the way electrical construction works, that student might report to one job for 1 week and then another job another week, and he could be bouncing all around and he could be saying, hey, you're going to see Bill today and Joe tomorrow and Jim the next day. And now all of a sudden, he's, the young man or woman that's the apprentice is now getting very confused because they have, many different leaders talking to them in many different ways. So, then you throw the fact that they're working really hard during the day on these multiple projects with multiple people telling them what to do. If they're not taking that, personal connection type of relationship with them, they get even more confused when they come to school because now their instructor is telling them the electrical theory, right? So they have so many different things going on that we're working very hard with our contractors to try and eliminate as much of that as possible to get it where you can get down to that, personal connection with the leader that is teaching them the hands-on training. I think that myself and our staff has done a fantastic job with that. And I think that, the instructors getting on that personal level with them helps. And so that's why I went with the words of connection and consistency. It's just a little bit different, than Ty and Kimberly because of the multiple people overseeing these young men and women.
Right. And I think that's what we heard if you joined us for the conversation with Senator McCrae, which was like you're going to have in construction a lot of mentors, and some of them are going to be great, and some of them are going to be not so great. And it's incumbent upon that apprentice to sort of like follow the guidance and of your mentors that are kind of showing you the right way to do it. Kim, what do you think from your experience at the hub?
Wow, so much of what has been shared really kind of echoes what my suggestions, like what Bob said. I think Ty started us off well. I'm thinking about that whole notion that Ty brought up and lifted up around the bidirectionality of mentorships, right? That this is not just top down. You do this, and then what Bob emphasized around the consistency, that importance, and the connection. And that made me think about what I like to call grounding, like foundational grounding. So when you think about, what are kind of those things that definitely are really important for moving that needle forward, Zach, kind of tying all of what we've been talking about thus far, this has to be very intentional, right? So I think one of the biggest things to move that needle forward is to make sure that that foundational grounding is going to occur. And what that means and one of the ways that that shows up in preparation and helping an apprentice to be successful is making sure that the matching process, a bit about who that apprentice is, why they're there, some of the why, but getting a little bit deeper into the who. What I've found in some of the work that I've done with clients with when it pertains to mentorship, really kind of helping them with process improvement, where apprenticeship or mentorship is a core component of it, is ensuring that those supports, so that how you conceptualize the design of that mentorship program and how you really think about that foundational grounding. What does the matching process look like? And oftentimes it's not a one and done. It could be a combination of making sure that there's been a lot of what like landscape, or what I call getting that foundational backstory so that you can really get a sense of who will work well with whom. Because you're right, the mentor-mentee relationship is going to evolve. There are different types, the duration can vary. And to ensure that, those goals and objectives are met, it's really going to be important to ensure that you've definitely done that kind of foundation building in that respect. And also, too, I think, and I know we'll probably, I anticipate talk about it more, is to make sure that we have shared expectation, right? What is success? And how do we operationalize success when we're talking about this apprenticeship and relationship and this mentor-mentee relationship?
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important in that matching process. And I'd like for you all to kind of dive a little bit deeper from your own experiences, spend a little bit of time telling us a little bit about your organization, a little bit more from a high level view on your mentoring practices. And Bob, I want to kick it off with you. I mean, let's dive into this idea around matching. Is that something that you all do? Is it something that you think about? From an IEC perspective, how do you think about mentoring done really well?
That's a great question, Zach, and thanks for putting me on here. You know, as an association and running the school, we don't really get to choose, who the mentor is going to be, who the training supervisor is going to be, and every electrical contractor is different, right? This would fall into the same parameters if it was AC or plumbing or any other trade, right? You're going to have small shops that have maybe four or five, people total working, and you're going to have contractors that have, 500 people working, right? So, looking for that connection and looking for that right person is difficult and virtually has nothing to do, with us as a school. But I think the groundwork is set before somebody even gets put into apprenticeship and even gets hired. We focus a lot of time on entry level, pre-apprentice type of work. We get 40 or 50 calls every single month of individuals that want to get into the trade. They wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, I want to be an electrician." But do they know the pros and the cons? Do they know the good? Do they know the bad? Do they know that it's a fantastic trade to get into? Do they know how hard they're going to work? And so we like to give them the good and the bad and the ugly. We like to prepare them. We don't want to, we don't want to do a 50 hour or 150 hour, entry level pre-apprentice type of course and paint a whole bunch of rainbows and flowers that says you're going to be making $35 an hour in 4 years, right? And then the first thing they do is go to a job site and they're crawling through attics and they're digging ditches and they're carrying conduit around the side of a job. And like I say, this is going to be the same scenario for plumbing, the same scenario, for HVAC. Like you have to learn, right? You have to spend time learning. And so when you go in there with, if you don't have that expectation, if an apprenticeship program or any training association of any kind does not cover the good, bad, and the ugly, and only gives them this is how much money you're going to make, and you don't have to go to college. And sure, we get all that, but we like to dig into, they're not necessarily negatives. They're just pathways to get to where you have to get, right? So I think we do a fantastic job here doing that. And listen, if a young man or woman comes into that entry level program or one of the info sessions that we teach about how to get into the trades and where you can go with it, if they find out that that's not for them, it's okay. Like, check that box off. At least
Right.
you tried something.
Right.
And if that's maybe not your thing, well, go try something else. I was a product of a mom and dad that said I had to go to college. And it took me 4.5 years to get through a 2-year community college because clearly college wasn't for me. But I didn't have the opportunities to go try out these other things or to hear and see what they do. And I think that first step of mentorship comes from, you don't want to just get somebody hired and say, put him in my school, and then he drops out because he didn't know he was going to work so hard and he didn't know he was going to have to go to school 2 nights a week.
Mhm.
And I know that's getting into the attrition thing that we'll talk a little bit more about later, but it's so important that groundwork comes well before, you know, they're assigned a mentor to oversee them at work. There's just way more to it.
Makes a lot of sense. Ty, kind of picking up on Bob's points here, and something I'm interested in is, when apprentices are coming in to CityWorks and they're getting started and they're getting placed, like how do you prepare them for like what a mentor even is? Like what does that relationship look like? Do you do some coaching and advising ahead of time? Tell us a little bit about how you all handle it.
Absolutely. I think the mentor piece is tiered for us because of course you have us as the intermediary at CityWorks DC, but then you may have some current high school students that have mentors at school, and then you have them on the work site, right? And so in my experience and in my approach of being with CityWorks on both sides, it's us creating that network as mentors ahead of the apprentice, right? So that means, well, who in the school system,
Mhm.
K-12 is my point of contact, and who will that be on the employer side, right? So that we can figure out if we have shared goals, right? Like, what's going on in the school side, what details can you give me on the school side, and what, does the employer anticipate, right? Because I think that one of the, when you're talking about the employer engagement side, ensuring that us as a support system and as a pillar for the employer, we have to make sure that what we're doing and how we're mentoring the apprentice is aligned with the organizational goals, right? So that in the long run, we see that success, we see that ROI, we see the succession planning and all the things that come with that, like the development, the skill development, the PD, but we also want to leverage the culture of leadership. And John Maxwell, who happens to be one of my favorite authors and teachers of leadership ever, he says that mentorship is who you are and what you do, right? And so again, that balance between, the mentor and the mentee, we have to figure out who are we as individuals. So having those regularly scheduled internships, I mean, not internships, but cadences for one-on-ones and developing IDP plans and vision mapping. That's important when you are starting out with meeting with your mentee, right? Getting to understand who they are, because a lot of the youth, they are coming into their identity, right? We have to help
Mhm.
them build that confidence, right? And so advocacy is what I found to be, for me, workable and doable, right? Because it lets the apprentice know that one, I want you to be treated like a human being, right? But I want to know what interests you. I want to know what's your game, right? I want to understand you as a person. And yes, that's going to come over time. But our approach, even if we don't have that shared common background between me and the apprentice, there may be some cultural barriers and everything like that. My job for them, even if I don't want to, or even if and when it has inconvenienced me, is to make sure that you are 10 times better than when you started, right? And so when
Mhm.
I was an apprentice supervisor, to help me build relationship with my apprentices, I had a rule of five. And so I called it Ty's Rule of Five. It was every day I ask questions, every day I engage, every day I practice, every day I apply, right? And so, did I miss one? Every day I ask questions, every day I engage, every day I apply. Um, yeah, and I'm sorry, I think that was four, or was it five? Yeah, I think it was four. But
Rule of four.
rule of
Yeah.
four. Every day I ask questions, every day I engage, every day I practice, every day I apply. And I think the last one was every day I engage in relationship building. It was something like that, right? But I had a rule of five. Um,
Oh.
and that was set so that when I did engage with my apprentices on a daily and a weekly basis, I was one purposely, intentionally outside of the training plans and the PD and all the things. I was trying to understand them as a person, right? I wanted to know who they were as a person to help them feel seen in such a large organization. I wanted to make them feel important, right? And so when it was time for me to support them and engage them in things that we had to do as an organization, they felt empowered, right? Understanding that empowerment and encouragement are two separate things, right? And so
Mm,
my approach was to let them know that I'm standing behind you, right? I'm in the passenger seat of the car that you're driving, right? I can't hit the gas, I can't hit the brake. Only you can do that, right? And your vision is very different from mine, but as long as we stay stable and steady in the right place, we're both headed in the same direction. And you'll see that over time, the relationship develops. They become more vulnerable, more transparent. They welcome you into their world instead of it feel like a forced relationship. So
right,
the
right.
people part is what mattered to me most, and understanding that you'll realize in a mentee mentor relationship that the mentee turns out to be more helpful to you than you to them, right? Because you get to be exposed, right? To, oh, I didn't even know, you thought like that, or I didn't understand that that was a technology system that you use. So it's fun. And for me, I gamified it, right? So it
Yeah.
was a maze. It was like Pac-Man to me. Like I gamified it in so many different ways that it became enjoyable, even on the worst days of them knowing that they supported me in days when I didn't even feel like it, right? Because as adults, we can take on so much weight, but for them to, you know, notice it and take ownership and be able to collaborate with me was very special to me, in my opinion.
This is great. Ty, I want you to mentor me at some point. I love Ty's rule of five. I love this quote about being a mentor of who I am and what I do. All those are nuggets I'm carrying away. Kim, what do you think from your perspective at the hub?
Oh my goodness. As I'm hearing, Ty talk, and I'm thinking about the work that we do at the hub, I'm thinking about the how, because everybody, will not get a tie. And it would be so amazing if we could just take all of that passion and skill and just spread it, even though we know those folks. But let's also be clear, having said that, mentorship for the most part is not an obligatory thing. So folks who step up to mentor typically are doing it because they want to share, they want to stretch, and they want to grow, and they definitely want to pay it forward. So it may not quite be a top. I just love how you just entered with all of your passion and all of your expertise and just in the posture that you bring. I think from what I'm hearing is kind of another reason why, one of the things that we also talk about when we talk about good mentorship design and execution is how do we learn from it? How do we evaluate it? How do we ensure that there is alignment with what we've conceptualized and then what we want it to yield in actually in terms of a good apprenticeship? So grounding on that why. So when I think about all those nuggets that Bob and Ty are lifting up, I love this notion of also being just as intentional about how do we really work with intentionality to really state, and I love to double down on it because I think it's so important throughout the life course of any good mentorship program is double downing on not taking for granted that we're all defining success in the same way, that we craft a common language to really speak to what it is that we're trying to describe or what we're trying to achieve. And then we create some metrics that don't have to be super hard, but practical metrics to measure and gauge success along the way. Because another thing, whether we're talking about, intergenerational mentorship, which I think is super amazing, or any other type of mentorship, one thing that is always, important is to get some indicator of success or goals or mile markers on
Mm,
the way to what it is that we're trying to achieve. And so taking that extra time, definitely in the beginning, right, as we're conceptualizing and then designing the mentorship program, but also too, as we are in the field doing the work, having the learnings, that bubble up and incorporating those learnings into subsequent mentorship rounds or cohorts, and also too messaging back to mentors who are, whether they be journeymen or whether they're further along in their skill building, career. What are the things that we're learning from, and many of those things shared by them from their
mhm.
experiences, from the nature of their interaction with their mentor. So I think that, all of this richness to ensure that it's scalable, sustainable. We also, I just wanted to lift up the importance of making sure that we measure it and that we have a way to chronicle what we're learning, challenges that we encounter, pain points that bubble up, and how we basically resolve those, deal with those, and then incorporate that into our subsequent learning.
I love that. I want to come back to you, Kim, on just something you said early on, and tell me in like the context that you're working in and supply chain and automation. Like you said something that I think was really important, which is uh, mentors have to step up. Like, and I think that's really important when perhaps when we're thinking about selecting. Like, you shouldn't be jammed into being a mentor. Perhaps maybe some people will be drug in and then shine, but there is going to be some folks that will step up. Tell me about that when you're thinking about companies and how they select their mentors.
Absolutely. And I think of it from two different kind of positionalities, if you will. The work that we do with companies in this space, and then also the times that I've been approached to be a mentor to mid career professionals. And I think that there has to be that appetite, that recognition that, this is going to probably be something that is going to, the cost, if you will, that I guess the economist in me always kind of comes out as well, this opportunity cost, right? This is going to be yet one more call upon my time, my effort, my energy. But what I'm crafting, if I look at it from like a couple of steps back and think of it from almost like a systems perspective, is I'm creating a community of learning, right?
Mhm.
Or I'm contributing to that community of learning, and I'm making it bigger. I'm broadening the tent, and I'm creating safe spaces for vulnerability, for knowledge creation, and really for growth, both emotionally, professionally, and in all the ways. So I think, from that mentor stepping up, I think there needs to be, like I said, that desire, that appetite, that recognition that paying it forward pays off. And I think that sometimes, it may be more of a reluctant role that we step into as a mentor, but I do think that there is sometimes a predisposition of who's the type of a person that can be a good mentor. But I also believe that it's not just a one typology. I think anybody can be a mentor, but I think that you have to cultivate that recognition so that folks can see themselves in those spaces.
Yeah, Ty, I'm hoping you can comment on this a little bit. So, at Urban Institute, we hired an apprentice, Erica, who graduated. She's doing great. She's in college. And after completing her apprenticeship, and we sort of struggled a little bit when we were thinking about like who was best to mentor her. And we were thinking about, does this person need to be young? Can this person be older? I mean, should they be close in age? Should they be close in sort of like where they are in life? Like, so from your perspective, like when you're working with employers, how do you tell your employers, who makes up for a good mentor, and like how do you sort of combine the services that Cityworks does with the mentorship that's going to happen at the employer site?
That's such a good, like loaded question, right? And considering, I'll answer this from both sides, considering I used to work in HR, right? And I was that employer supervisor. And I can honestly say, just to be very transparent, there will be to Kim's point, there will be a lot of no's, right? Because of the perspective of the young person, right?
Mhm.
And many adults in my experience has seen mentorship as I'm taking care of somebody else's child. And so their perspective of mentorship is skewed because you're not taking care of someone else's child. you're amplifying the next gen. So amplifying could mean you're amplifying their voice, right? You're helping them elevate, you're helping them raise their head high enough to see opportunity, as many of them are not able to see because they are in such a restricted environment, or they may not know what they have access to, or they may not know what a super exceeded and prosperous future looks like for them, right? And so putting yourself in this position as an employer on the employer side, and one of the reasons why I said yes is because I understood the heartbeat of my leadership's want to and their why behind why
Yeah.
they wanted to raise up next gen, right? And so it's like, well, why did you say yes to CityWorks DC, right? Like, what's your purpose, what's your mission, so that I can understand the part that I need to play, even if the pieces and the game plan is not all the way there and it was not planned out for me. I just said yes because I wanted to, understanding that this is not charity, right? Because, and then I simplified it
Yep.
for myself, and understanding that if this was my niece, or if this was my nephew or my son or my daughter, would I want them to have a mentor that will serve as their guide? Absolutely, right? And mentorship is you being the guide of an individual, not the ride of an individual. So you're not saying, oh, let me do this for you. No, you're showing them how to do it. And regardless of how many questions they ask, it's you sticking to what your why is for saying yes, right? What's the mission? What's the vision, right? And the larger part is the relationship building between, I would say, Cityworks DC and my previous employer, is that they work together, or I'll say we work together to create an effective mentorship youth structure that will be able to support the apprentices over 3 years, right? So we
Mhm.
built the plane while we were flying it, right? Because we did not have a vehicle for
Right.
it, right?
Right.
Literally, the same month that I joined the organization was the same month that CityWorks DC was like, hey, we need some job descriptions. And I'm like, what? Excuse, right? But understanding that my goal for joining the apprenticeship program and being a mentor for 3 lasting years, and even I still have a relationship with my apprentices now, is the framework that we built, right? It was the
Mhm.
training plan and providing that structure, not just for the apprentice, but for me, because I was able to, make it scalable over the months, right? So what are we working on in the month of February, right? Or what are we working on in quarter 2? That simplified it for me to make it not seem so overwhelming, right? What are
Mhm.
the competencies, and leaning on CityWorks DC to say, well, what do you want the outcomes to be, right? And asking them the questions instead of me always answering the questions, and I may not have had an answer. I may not even have had the opportunity to have the conversations. But I think that more so, just to wrap all of this up, is just to develop the framework, right?
Mhm.
Understand the why for what you're doing, and understanding that this just may be the one that can be the next president, or may be the next
Right.
mayor, right? And so we're working on the discovery process, and again, like, just gamify it, right? Just make it fun. We
Yeah.
adults,
Yeah.
we have to loosen up and not be so uptight, right? And it's not another job, right? It's not another job.
100%.
You're raising up the next you if you look at it like that.
100%. And I think you point out something that's so important, is like critical to the employer, is the why they're doing the apprenticeship. Like when I was at Urban Institute and now at AFA, I mean, my why is really because I want to walk the walk. I want to bring up the next generation. I was handed the keys to the middle class from someone else, and I want to bring someone up. So,
Mhm.
Bob, I want to take this in a completely different direction, and I want to ask you, what do you do when a mentor is like, I'm struggling, I'm not connecting, I don't understand what's wrong with this young person I'm supposed to be mentoring. They're not following directions. Like, how do you help that person?
That's a great question. I just saw somebody comment too, in the chat there, it popped up about, not all apprentices are young, right? Some of the apprentices
Yeah.
are older, right? So finding somebody that is going to gel properly, and connect the way I talked about earlier is really, really important. And is it just one person or is it multiple people, that individual is seeing? But I think we do such a good job, and I think everybody needs to focus on the entry level before that person, gets in and gets hired. It's with, we're by no means the largest apprenticeship school in the world, but at 350 students and 75 contractors that are sending people to us, it's very difficult for me to get individual, Zach, like your question is there is what if this one student out of 350 doesn't have a good mentor? But I think the fact that the majority of them come through us and we help them get hired, they come back to us because we were kind of that original mentor, right? We're the ones that set the groundwork that said, and whether that was myself or my admin team or my membership team, the event, it doesn't matter who it was. One of the five of us got that connection with that person, and when they
Mhm.
get hired, they're not leaving us, right? However, that mentor may be coming from that other program, which they are, but those students we find come back to us and they ask us the questions, or if they tell us something is not gelling right with him or her and their mentor or their supervisor or whoever it is that's overseeing them, then we take the opportunity to go to the contractor members. That's one of my benefits of having the 35 years in the trade and knowing every business owner of every company that sends people to our school, right? Because a lot of that is out of our hands, but it's not when that person is prepared to say, hey, something isn't quite right here, or something isn't jiving, right? So we do oftentimes utilize that and go in, and it's not a difficult conversation. It's a hey, we both want this young man or woman to succeed, so we have to get him with somebody else or get him on a different avenue. And I hope that part is what it answers your question, because we are completely different, than Tyre Kimberly when you're working with 75 different contractors that are sending these people, to your school. But I think as long as, like what I said earlier, that culture and that comfort and connection feeling is set early, they're going to come to you no matter who they're working for, knowing that we're going to be able to help them out. And I think that's a true mentor. That's a true leadership opportunity, even when you're not for the physical company that they work for. So I hope that kind of covers and answers what
Yeah, no, I think
you're
so.
looking for.
What I wanted to, and feel free, anyone to jump in here, is really, we do a lot of thinking about the mentor-mentee relationship, but often we're not thinking about, well, this mentor needs to be prepared for a young person or an older person to come into this workplace and for me to show and demonstrate what I know, and then allow that person to also do that work very well. How do you think about really structuring train the trainer or capacity building from each of your individual, and whoever wants to jump in here, please jump in.
Well, I'm happy to jump in first, and I
Go ahead.
promise I'll try to keep it quick. I think that, because all while we've been having this conversation, I've also been thinking about that, how important it is to have mentor support, right?
Mhm.
To the point that we've all been lifting up. There's a lot that's being called upon, being asked of a mentor, and never is it linear or just like, in one bend. Yes, the emphasis is going to be on work-related outcomes primarily, but there are going to be other things that are going to probably have to be acknowledged, addressed, incorporated to get to that, social emotional support, creating that safe space. But to achieve those things, it is definitely important to also acknowledge and lift up the fact that mentors, are going to need their own place to go, safe space to vent, to problem solve, to ideate, and to get some tools to help them as they walk alongside their mentors. And that can be as different as, sector to sector, industry to industry within those sectors, business to business within those industries. So I think that, because technology, is always changing, and as the workforce grows from a generational standpoint alone, right, there are going to be so many different things that are going to be expected and needed. We're talking about Gen Zers and millennials. There's also now this emerging alpha generation entering the workforce, and each of these generations bring with them, the way that they have come to be, just as an artifact of the world that they were born into. And
Are
it's not.
they digital natives, like compared to like,
Yes,
the Gen X who didn't have email till 1997? So
that part. Yes, absolutely. So, and I'll just end it there because we could go on and on, at least from my
yeah,
part. But I think that speaks to how important mentor support is.
Bob, I see you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to add something real quick, and it's not a difficult thing, but on the electrical and on the construction side of things, training is really, really important. Some people are going to hear, well, why does a mentor have to be trained? And I don't necessarily mean it in that context, but if somebody went to 4 years of apprenticeship school and is a very good electrician and learned all the basic theory, that does not mean that he's a leader. So as an association, we offer leadership training and foreman training and project manager training and other things that not only give you the electrical theory that you need, but teaching you how to lead people. We're actually starting our first ever introductory to leadership program, which is only going to be a 2-hour program. And it's because, just because you know the trade doesn't mean you know how to teach somebody else to do that, right? So
100%.
it sounds like a really basic 101 type of rule, but most people say, well, you're a real good electrician, so teach him. And that's not the case. So we've found that we're expanding our programs to do that. And every time you get into a second or a third year or a fourth year guy that's now overseeing one or two people, that's the direction you have to go. So we highly encourage our electrical contractors to start putting them into those trainings so that we don't have to have those slightly more difficult conversations like I talked about earlier when a mentor just isn't connecting with someone.
Yeah, yeah. Ty, I want to turn to you for like a different perspective. Just for one, I just want to learn from you. So, but like around building trust, I think like this trust aspect is so critical in terms of like being a mentor who's a bit older and building that trust with somebody, as we've talked about, is from a different generation, that is going to have a different background. I'm a country boy from Indiana who moved out east. I'm going to have a very different experience from Freddie, who grew up in DC and joined AFA as one of perhaps one of his first jobs. I mean, some of these folks, this is their first job, and how do you build that trust? How do you manage some of those intergenerational dynamics? What advice do you have?
I would say I take a similar approach, but I flex, depending on the generation, right? And specifically when you're talking about the youth, but I have this ideology that I adopted from one of my mentors that she expressed to me, people don't care how much you know. They only
Mm,
care about how much you show up, when you show up, and how much you care, right? And so that could understanding that for them, consistency matters for young people. And young people, they pay close attention to how you show up. Again, even when it's inconveniencing for you,
mm,
and that reliability is what builds the trust for them faster than your charisma, than your charm, than any of your good intentions, right? And you can
mm.
notice that when you tell anyone in your family, you can tell. I have a niece, I mean, not a niece, a cousin. And I remember years ago, I told her I was going to take her to Chuck E. Cheese. I never took her to Chuck E. Cheese, but she kept reminding me every single time. And so they care more about how you show
Yeah.
up when you show up, even if it's the smallest things, and you committing to your word, right? And so it's not your word is bond, but it's your word that helps build that bridge towards the trust and that earning trust on both sides, right? What I've also realized is meet them where they are. They're not perfect.
Mhm.
We're not perfect, right? And so the trust that is developed is when you recognize that we're both navigating this thing, right? I'm not sure if you could fulfill X, and I know you don't understand or trust that I can fulfill X, but their realities are real, right? The young people's realities are real. So what happens at school, what happens at work, what happens in their families, and the additional responsibility that they directly or indirectly take on, and those pressures, it causes them to become self-protected, right? And to
Right.
comfort themselves, and for us to understand that they're human too, right? And meeting them where they are and saying, you know what, we're going to take this one step, one punch, one round at a time, and showing genuine interest in them as a person, right? Showing genuine interest in their goals and in their identities, right? What are some of their aspirations,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't look like ours when we were that age, right? And just trusting them because they are real people, right? And so to approach the person first, followed by the work, will
Mhm.
make it much easier to build a bridge, right? And I remember going through my master's program, and I read a book called Building Bridges, Not Walls. When you go in with this expectation into mentoring that this is just what I have to do, is so cookie cutter, right? Mentorship is not linear, right? Like it's sporadic, it's all over the place. You know,
Mhm.
the apprentice or your mentee could be excelling and performing absolutely phenomenal. And 2 weeks later, is what happened? What's going on, right? And so
Yeah.
instead of putting that added pressure on them to show up when they don't know how, because they aren't functioning adults, right? They don't know how to create balance, right? Or they don't know how to show up in difficulty, just coming down a little bit, right? It may take some time, it may take some hammering, but even if you just have to look over the wall a little bit and just say, I'm here to listen. It means more to them than you just saying, I need you to produce this report, or I need you to show up here, or I need you to show up there. They'll begin to answer the question, and then they will auto correct, right? They will self correct themselves into saying, you know what, I didn't do this. I apologize about this. Allow me some space and some time. They will ask for the resources, right? They just need sometimes us to come to them because they are, within their own space, within their own head, within their own shell.
Well, we have some audience questions. Bob, go ahead and jump in here, and then and then once you jump in here, talk about the question that's in the chat about onboarding, because I found that to be kind of tough to think about when in a lot of organizations are like this. They're doing apprenticeship for the first time. And like thinking about how do you, well, is it the same onboarding as an apprentice as like a regular employee? Probably not. So go ahead, Bob.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to jump in just on your last question is that, anybody that does any type of entry level program, whether it's to be an electrician or it's to do anything else, what we found huge success is that we have our fourth year apprentices that have just graduated our program. They're the ones that teach all those classes. Right? They may want to be, an apprenticeship instructor later, but these entry level programs are very, they're very informal programs that are getting to the facts. However, they don't want to hear from the old guy like me that's been doing it for 35 years. They want to learn from somebody that just did it. So if you have the opportunity to bring in somebody that just did exactly what they want to do, they are going to connect and relate to that, younger person, certainly quicker and better.
And I just put in the chat, anyone who would like to raise their hand and ask a question, come off mute and jump in here. Kimberly, thoughts on that question in the chat though on onboarding? I saw you kind of shaking your head on that one. Any thoughts?
Well, Overall, I think that, so we know that all of the different phases from the outreach, the recruitment, we definitely want, apprentices, to be successful within the company where they are working and contributing. I think onboarding is sometimes a phase in that process that can just be taken for granted, but it's such a huge opportunity, right, to do so many tremendous things. It's a huge opportunity to showcase, not in a way that really oversells, but showcase and just say, here is who we are, and this is what we're all about. It's one of those opportunities as well in their onboarding phase for an apprentice to really get us like almost like a panoramic view of what they're stepping into, kind of the different facets of the organization. And honestly, more and more, I see that onboarding is becoming a phase in the whole process of getting and bringing in amazing talent, whether it be an
Mm.
apprentice or just a newly minute worker into the place and space. It is an amazing opportunity to really have some bi-directional exchange of just, of each other, of who is this person in relation to the organization, and all of the different ways that the organization, really can be there for the apprentice. And what I really mean by that is, oftentimes there's so much preoccupation with getting in, doing the work, but then there's going to be that time, when you're more seasoned and you're kind of, approaching that journeyman phase, that you're really wanting to see, is this a place where I can grow? Is this a place where other interests, curiosities, and skills that I bring can really, are even seen, let alone valued? So I think that, onboarding can be a very key part, a key phase in the overall process where an apprentice can see, yeah, that may not be where I am now, but I see that. That's something I'm curious about. And I definitely want to look into that more. This gives me something to work toward. It can even be the space where, because as always, having those conversations, grounding on what success looks like and what are the goals in both directions, where it gives the apprentice some space to say, I'm aware of this thing, not sure what it is, but I'd like to know more about it and maybe grow into it. So that's just some of the ways I think that the onboarding phase can be leveraged even more.
I like that a lot. I see Dr. Roslyn. Dr. Roslyn.
Hi, Zach. And it's nice to meet you all. My name is Dr. Rosalind Heineman. I'm with Siebens Paisley team. I just had a really quick question. I was hoping someone can maybe touch on really quick just about mentor burnout and how do I incentivize mentors to continue to take on this non-obligatory role in a sense that, they stay motivated, they stay kind of equipped with the best practices even to continue forward. So can you guys touch on just mentorship burnout, how we're ensuring that mentors are still getting the best practices in the industry to be able to, set the next generation up for success?
I could go with that one. Because of course, like in my own personal experience, of course, I experienced that. And what I discovered for me, it was three major components. And it became a very self-aware thing, not selfish, right? But it was the self-care that I needed because mentors, we need breaks, right? We need to
Hmm.
be able to step away, take a break, and we I'll get to that in a second. But we need to be able to step away, take a break, take the time off, but we also need to set boundaries because
Mm,
that care will extend and extend and extend and extend. And then we feel like we need to do more and more and more, even when we're doing such a phenomenal job, right? And then
hmm.
creating that balance, right? That balance of that work life balance, right? Like how do I balance and keep this mentorship at work, and what am I going to allow to extend beyond working hours? And then the recognition and appreciation, both publicly and
Hmm.
privately, right? We need to see the highlights, we need to see the incentives, right? And the incentives can be whatever size, right? But it's appreciated for the work that we're doing because the mentorship is the but not limited to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you are able to see those incentives, recognition and that appreciation, it goes a long way, right? And it's a sign of culture. And I say that culture is not your core values at work, right? It's how we behave, it's what we do. So if you see that I'm struggling, or if you see that I'm not in a good headspace, or if you just see that I am producing at such a high level, right? Recognize that, appreciate that, because it'll make me feel seen and make me feel valued, right? In any capacity, but also the peer support and the community that's built around that mentorship and building that in within a company's culture is essential, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
need a space where I can share my experiences. I need to know that I'm not in this thing alone. I need to know that other people are experiencing some of the same challenges. What are the best practices? I need to
Mm-hmm.
plug in regularly, like I do my cell phone in the wall, so that I do not isolate, and it helps me build morale when I have that community. I hope that was fruitful.
That
Absolutely. That was very fruitful.
I love that.
Thank
And
you.
Ty, we're going to leave it there. You got the last word. I just want to thank you all, Kim, Bob, Terry, Ty, and Dr. Roslyn. Thanks for jumping in here and asking the last question. Thank you all for joining Apprenticeships for America today. I learned a lot, and excited to take some of this away. And look out for our next webinar next week on apprenticeship growth. All right. Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.